Welcome into episode 436 of the Skate Podcast. I am Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. Bridget and Scott, we have a unique episode today that we're going to get to, but before we get into anything, I just want to mention that last night during the Leafs-Senators game, did any of you tuning in just get completely gutted when they randomly wanted to flash back to the Bruins-Flyers 2010 Game 7?
What the hell was that?
What a ricochet shot.
Yeah, I was like, what the hell? Like, who needed to see this?
I was out at a restaurant watching it, and I was planning on going with my friends to watch the Celtics, and they had that game on before, and I was just going, I literally yelled out loud to my friends, "What the hell is this? Like, why are we showing this right now?" So I didn't even hear what the explanation was to why they were showing it. I just was like, there's nothing in my mind that can make me like look. Was it? It had to have been in the context of trying to come back from being down in the series. So,
Yeah.
Which they're halfway there. So
yeah, the Austin Matthews era Leafs now 1-13 in closeout games.
Crazy.
Yeah, and now I was talking to my dad during Game 4 when Toronto had that double minor power play with a chance to win the series in overtime, and it wasn't even a good power play, let alone not scoring on it. And then of course Ottawa scores that goal in overtime, and it's one of those things where it's still 3-1, but what you've done now is now you've opened the door a little bit, and now all it takes is a stinker on home ice, and then Ottawa goes back home feeling good, which is exactly how it's played out. And then you go back to Toronto for Game 7, and the anxiety and the nerves are through the roof for the team that's been up in the series. I know this because the Bruins themselves have not only blown that 3-0 series lead to the Flyers in 2010, but they have had multiple 3-1 series leads over the last 20 years that they've given up and gone to Game 7. Some Game 7s they pulled it out, some they lost. So we've seen in Boston that pendulum swing, and the moral of the story is you want to close out your opponent when you have the opportunity, and so that's a fascinating series playing out.
Yeah, they've let Linus Ullmark find some confidence where I can't imagine he had much earlier in this series, where the bad starts in the playoffs were piling up for him. I think he had lost 6 straight playoff starts at one point, once they were down 0-3, and now all of a sudden he's got a shutout in Game 5 going back home, and he probably feels great about himself. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of nerves in Toronto after that game, and they've definitely opened the door, and that's become, it's funny because I think we were all excited about that series going in, and it was kind of one of the premier series, and then after a couple of games, they're like, oh, maybe Toronto really is just much better, and Ottawa's not ready. Like, remember how undisciplined the Senators were early in the series, and now it feels like it's potentially on the verge of completely flipping.
Even though 2 of Toronto's wins came in overtime.
Right. But Ottawa just, especially I think games 1 and 2, like Ottawa just did not look composed at all. Like you could tell it was a team that was there for the first time and like almost didn't know how to handle themselves. But yeah, I do agree. Like there's been some overtime games, and I do think for the series as a whole, it's not like it's been totally lopsided. Like I don't look at the series and think like, well, Toronto's a way better team and they've kind of just let it slip away. Like on the whole, it's actually probably like a pretty evenly played series if you look at scoring chances and all that stuff.
And that with, like, say Ullmark goes on a run, Ottawa beats the Leafs, they continue to go on in the playoffs, we're going to hear even more revisionist history about which goalie the Bruins should have kept last offseason, and who they should have moved on from. But still enjoying NHL playoffs, even though Bruins are out. We still are finding, things to root for. And Canadiens Washington tonight, I'm excited to watch again because that's been a crazy series. I've been entertained by that one thoroughly, and I'm hoping that it continues. And I want 7 games in that one. So Montreal's got to win.
That's been like, well, I guess any series Edmonton's in tends to be wide open, but that's been one of the more wide open series just in terms of like exciting up and down action. Like not exactly the most structured defense being played in the Washington Montreal series, which
And then like a team brawl, except for Lane Hudson
Right.
and Ryan Leonard, who are just like hugging each other. It was so cute.
yeah, you got guys fighting literally on the benches.
Yeah, it's been great. I love it.
Once they leave Canha-Imagn, the rivalry kind of simmers a little bit.
I mean, they're friends from Team USA. It was funny. It was funny to me. I thought it was cute.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
two nice kids, as far as I know. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just a quick roundup while we're kind of deep into the playoffs now. So, I mean, the Oilers have stormed back for 3 straight wins over the Kings. I mean, and Quinn Byfield had a chance to clear the puck in Game 4, and obviously give it the Kings a 3-1 series lead. Not that everything comes down to one play; it doesn't in a game. But Edmonton's come back in that series now. Carolina closed out New Jersey in a that series was honestly. I had Carolina in 5, and that's how it played out. But the 5 games that took place were a little bit more entertaining than I probably thought they would be, given the two teams' natures. And yeah, Vegas and Minnesota's been a good series out west. So Tampa, Florida tonight. Tampa now 5 wins away and 5 more games from Marchand away from giving the Bruins a first-round pick in 2028, I think, as opposed to a second round. But they're looking good. A lot of animosity there. Some questionable plays, but
Yeah, that series has like actually boarded over or crossed the line into dirty play. You now have Aaron Ekblad suspended for 2 games for elbowing Hagel in the head. Hagel's going to miss at least the next game. They haven't said, but obviously everyone thinks that's a concussion.
Did Kachuk need a knee or attempted?
Yeah. You know, Hagel suspension, obviously. Yeah, Kachuk's had been involved in a couple questionable plays. Yeah, what was it? Mikola with, hitting a guy who's down on the ice up against the boards. Like, yeah, that's like it's been entertaining, but it's also actually crossed into dirty play. And I feel like the NHL and the refs in that series are just like barely holding on for dear life, trying to keep control. But Florida with a late comeback in Game 4 to take a 3-1 series lead, so they're in command despite all their antics, and now dealing with another suspension. It's funny, right? Like Ekblad comes back for 2 games and gets himself suspended again. So
yeah, and to try to tie it back to the Bruins quickly, as Bruins fans, we obviously do not have a rooting interest this spring with the Bruins out of the playoffs. So it's, on the one hand, it's obviously never fun when a local team is in the playoffs, but on the other hand, it does give you 2 months of stress-free hockey viewing. But so Bruins fans have a chance to sit back, relax, and just watch the other 16 teams played out and kind of have a neutral opinion. And it's funny because the chatter online, there's a lot of Bruins fans that will say, you see Tampa fans, you see what we've been dealing with. They're really good at what they do. They toe on the line and sometimes cross it, and they get away with things. But then you have other Bruins fans that will say, hold on a second, guys. This is the exact type of team that we embraced in 2011 and throughout much of the Bruins history. So do you feel like there's a bit of a hypocrisy a little bit with Bruins fans that don't embrace how Florida plays, how hard they play, and how edgy they play?
I don't think so, because I think that it's just frustrating when, as with every like good rat, like you don't like it when it's not you. Like you don't like it when they're not on your team. And so I don't think it's hypocritical. I think it's just the nature of being a fan. Like when it happens to you, you don't like it. And when it happens for you, you think it's the best thing ever. So I don't really think that's ever changed.
I think you just kind of defined hypocrisy.
I think I did, yeah, but like,
yeah,
it would be more surprising to me if people were like, "Oh yeah, it's fine when that happens to our best player." You know what I mean? Like it's against your nature to be okay with Kachuk like crossing the line and hitting like say Pasternak and hurting him. Like it's completely against competitiveness of fans and whatnot. So I'm not surprised, and I don't think it's ever going to change.
And like I will say, like I don't know what the percentages were, but there were also Bruins fans who wanted Marchand to clean up his act. Like when Marchand was doing like dirty stuff that could actually hurt guys, like there were fans who called him out for that. You know, it doesn't mean you suddenly hate Brad Marchand or you don't root for him anymore, but you don't root for him to do that, right? Like you don't root for him to sleuth with someone or low bridge someone. Now, I'm sure there are also Bruins fans who supported that and were like, I don't care, he's my guy. But it's not. I don't think it's hypocrisy to.
See?
Yeah. Yes. Like if you're okay with your guy doing it and mad when the other team does it, that's hypocrisy. But like, there's also that gray area as a sports fan where it's like, I love Brad Marchand, but I hate that he just slew-footed someone. So, like to me, that's not hypocrisy. That's just like the conflicted feelings of being a sports
Well,
fan.
I think slew footing is certainly a specific example where that's pretty dirty. But I mean,
Yeah.
like Marchand in 2011 when he's jabbing Henrik Sedin or Daniel like that, and everybody's loving it. I mean, that those weren't vicious. Come on now, Brian. I'm
Right.
not saying that they were vicious, but it's the idea of a team that plays with an edge that sometimes crosses the line, sometimes doesn't.
Yeah, and I'm for the record, like I'm totally okay with that stuff. Like, be a rat, get under team skin, like that's all part of it. I have an issue when it looks to me like guys are trying to hurt players. Like Aaron Ekblad elbowing Brandon Hagel in the head. There is no point of doing that other than to try to injure a guy who, yes, like injured one of your guys. Like we get why the Panthers have it out for Brandon Hagel right now. He injured Alexander Barkov, but still, like you can't elbow him in the head. Like that's just
Jack Edwards
wrong all the time.
I think Jack Edwards used to refer to the Aaron Ward special as the old forearm shiver. I think that's what he said on the podcast. That was the old elbow shiver, though. The old elbow shiver. All right.
Yeah, PK Subban was like kind of semi-excusing that on ESPN. He's like, I used to hit with my forearm sometimes, and I was like, I'm like watching. I'm like, okay, but if you forearmed a guy to the face, like you're gonna get suspended. What are we talking about?
He was one that I did not like to watch. Like he was a rough watch a lot of the time. It was like so obviously dirty, and like he'd always like argue it. It's like, no, you know what you did. But anyway, this is a special episode. We wanted to get into something that some of our viewers had asked us about in like sort of when we were asking for mailbag questions. We got asked to do a mock lottery and mock draft for the first. We're going to do the first 9 picks. Scott, who was our viewer that sent in the question?
Robbie requested it a couple times. I think there were a couple other mentions of doing something like this. But yeah, so we're gonna live on the air run the lottery. So we'll get our order. We can react to that, and then I got my nice Bruins fedora here.
Yeah,
gonna throw 3 pieces of paper in. That'll decide our draft order 1, 2, 3, and then we'll just repeat picks. And we decided just to do 9 picks because that gives us each 3 picks. That'll get us through. The Bruins obviously can go no lower than 7th, so it'll get us through the Bruins pick. And I think we kind of figured like, maybe we're wrong. Maybe people would want us to do the entire first round, but I feel like people might lose interest once you get 5, 6 picks past the Bruins.
I would. I totally
yeah.
would.
And I was gonna say, and quite frankly, like I haven't done my full scouting reports on 32 players yet. I feel like I've got like 15 to 20 in the bank, but more work to do before the actual draft.
Yeah, if the Bruins were drafting 25th again, then I'd be like, yeah, we'll have to go through the whole round pretty much. But I don't think Bruins fans have any interest in seeing where like past 8 or whatever, because so we're just gonna do the 9, which is interesting because there are some centers in this draft class that could go anywhere from 3 to 10. Like it just depends on how you value them, how risky you want to be, what you think guys' upside and floors are. So certainly we'll be talking about a lot of centers that we think will go in the top 10. Just where they end up shaking out is going to be the question. But first, we're going to run the lottery. So, Scott, do you have Tankathon? I got
Tankathon up. So I've done a few of these sims on my own, gotten a bunch of different results. I've been able to get the Bruins first a couple times, but we are just doing one and done. Whatever happens when I click this button, that's what we're rolling with. So here we go. All right. So here is our order. Picking first overall, moving up one spot, is the Chicago Blackhawks.
Okay.
Picking second overall, also moving up one spot, the Nashville Predators. San Jose Sharks dropped to third. And then the entire rest of the draft after that is the same order that it was going in. So Philadelphia Flyers fourth, Boston Bruins fifth, Seattle Kraken sixth, Buffalo Sabres seventh, Anaheim Ducks eighth, Pittsburgh Penguins ninth. And that gets us through the picks we are going to make.
All right. Well, that's not super exciting for Bruins fans that they finished fifth and they have the fifth pick, but
they
better than seventh.
I was gonna say they didn't drop down. They stayed fifth.
Yeah, you still have a top 5 pick, so that's good. That's good news in our little fake draft, our fake lottery, I should say.
All right, I got
so
my.
Now I have to pick who's
got my one, 2, 3 pieces of paper in my little hat. Shake it up. All right, who am I drawing for first?
Brian.
Okay, Brian is going to be pick number 3.
Okay.
So Brian will be 3, 6, 9. So not the Bruins. Bridget, you want to go? You want to be the next pick?
Sure. Two. All right. So there we go. Do I have the Bruins in? You're muted, Scott. You're muted, my guy.
Yep. I don't know how that happened. So Bridget's got the Bruins. You're 258, and I got the first pick 147.
Okay. All right. So let's get it started. So you're first, right, Scott? So
I'm first with the Chicago Blackhawks, who, that they could take Misa, get Connor Bedard a running mate, either number 2 center behind them, or even put him on the wing. But I think Chicago would go best player available. Consensus number 1 is Matthew Schaefer, left shot defenseman. I do think the Blackhawks could use some help on the left side of their defense. They have some promising young players on the right side, like Artem Lachinov and Sam Renzel. So I will give the Blackhawks Matthew Schaefer first overall.
All right. So I don't think we have really much of a counter to that because of Schaefer was kind of the consensus, and it maybe Misa would go first to a team that needed a center pretty desperately. So Schaefer going number 1, easy pick for Scott. All right, now I'm on the clock here. So with number 2, Nashville's picking, and I think that there's an obvious number 2 as well. Unfortunately for the Bruins, I think this is probably the guy that they want, but if they're picking at 5, I don't think he'll still be available. So I would say Nashville more than likely just going to go with the draft order and take Michael Misa.
Yeah, that makes sense. Is my audio any better?
Much better. Yep.
Okay, good. I apologize if it was not good while I was picking.
Yeah, it wasn't, but it's okay. Now it's fine. So we'll be back to normal audio. So Chicago picks Schaefer and Nashville picks Misa.
All right. Well, so going third here. So San Jose is third, Scott?
San Jose is third.
Okay. So right now, I guess I'm not going to change the mock draft order of Tankathon as well with my pick, because San Jose already has Macklin Celebrini, and Will Smith down the middle at center. Because Matthew Schaefer has now gone to Chicago, I don't think San Jose is going to reach 7 or 8 picks to grab a potential left shot defenseman in the draft, or however far down that next left shot defenseman would be. But I think they would probably go with, in this situation, Porter Martone and get that big winger. I think if anybody else is picking in the spot besides San Jose, I don't know if Martone's going here. But I think given San Jose is third in our mock draft scenario, and what I obviously just previously mentioned, I think maybe Porter Martone goes third to San Jose.
It feels like that's a skill set they could use in their top 6 too. Like they've got some shifty, skilled players, but that kind of power forward winger, like that makes I could see them going center because you can never really have too many, but Porter Martone does make a lot of sense there, I think.
All right. So I don't know if anybody saw that I've made this like tricky little banner that I figured out how to make today. So there we go. Look at that.
Good job, Bridget.
Fancy. So Philly's on the clock. That's you, Scott.
Yeah, so Philly, like Boston, needs a center. I think they're happy with the board breaking this way because now they have their pick of the next group of centers after Misa. And I'm going to give them who I think is the top center left, and that is Anton Frundell, who played for Djurgårdens in the Allsvenskan in Sweden's second division pro league. By the way, if he goes back there, he'll be playing in the top pro league because Allsvenskan won promotion to the top division. Or Djurgårdens, sorry, won promotion. But yeah, I really like Anton Frundell. He has maybe the best shot in this class. He's offensive minded. He's got a little bit of a power forward game. All situations player. So I think he would be the pick for Philly at 4.
Scott, can I also just add quickly? I wanna plug the article you wrote the other day for EEI.com, but Anton Frundell has the highest rating when it comes to looking at a prospect, the competition they're playing against, their skill set, all these things, their attributes, and figuring out the probability of them playing 200 plus games in the NHL and being considered an NHL star. You might have those details better, obviously, if you want to break that down for people.
Yeah, so as Brian mentioned, I wrote up a Bruins big board for WEI.com, basically ranking the top 10 players in the order I think the Bruins should rank them. But yeah, so NHL E, which is means NHL equivalency, basically takes the player's production, age, the league he's playing in, and basically compares it to other players who kind of fit the same resume and then projects their chances of having success in the NHL. And yeah, as Brian mentioned, that formula has Frundell at, so this is from Hockey Prospecting website, 99% chance of becoming an NHL regular and an 89% chance of becoming a star, which they define as 0.7 points per game, which would be what, like roughly 60 points ish range. So yeah, and the only four players over the last 2 years have had a better NHL E going into the draft than that. And those 4 players were Connor Bedard, Matvei Michkov, Macklin Celebrini, and Ivan Demidov. So pretty good company for Frundell. He as an under 18 player in the Allsvenskan this year, he had the highest points per game rate ever in that league, beating out William Nylander and David Pastrnak, who were second and third on that list. So yeah, the analytics really like Frundell. And I also really like the video of him.
So I want to answer, like, give my 2 cents on Frundell before we go to the Bruins pick. And I want to do something a little different than what we've been doing before for the Bruins pick, just because there's still a lot of centers on the board. I kind of want to go through them. And then maybe we can have a consensus pick for the Bruins, because this is what it's all about. But
no, you gotta pull the trigger though. This is all on you.
I'll tell you who I think, but I want to go through each
Okay.
option first. What I saw from Frundell, like the assessment from some of the European analysts, were that he has like one of the heaviest shots. They said his skating still needs improvement. And so, that's something that he's going to have to work on. And the one thing that was concerning with the analysis I heard from some of those European guys was they said he has a second line ceiling, which isn't terrible, but you're drafting in the top 5 and you're hoping that the draft has a few centers that could be first line centers. So
yeah, I don't agree with that, for the record. I definitely think he could be a first line center.
I was going off of that because that's someone who went to his actual games, and it's not as easy for us to get our hands on the Swedish games as it is for us to get our hands on, say, college hockey games and other leagues that are closer to us. So these were guys that went and watched him play in person.
By the way, who's watching him play in person right now? Because Frundell is down in Texas for the World Under-18 Championships. One Cam Neely is down there watching him in person. According to our friend Mark Diver, got that from a couple scouts. So
yeah, and there's a few of these guys that are going to go top 10 that are playing down there. The one other positive thing I had seen about Frundell was that he's naturally a center, but can play wing as well, because in that Swedish league, they kind of don't really let you start out as a center. You have to like work your way up to it, kind of. So that forces guys to be versatile and be able to play both. And because it's a pro league as well, he's already kind of gotten that physical maturity that some of the younger guys don't have. So those were some of the reports that I had heard about him. So him going as the second highest center behind Michael Misa, I wouldn't think it was a surprise. He's got certainly a different kind of game than the rest of these centers that we're about to talk about have. Because some of them are maybe a little one-dimensional, maybe a little bit more offensive, maybe a little riskier. So we're getting to the Bruins pick at 5. And I want to just bring up a few names before I tell you who I think they would or should take there if they're drafting at 5. So obviously James Higgins is still available on the board, who at the beginning of the college hockey season was projected to be first overall. He probably would still be available to you at number 5 if that's where the Bruins do end up drafting. And then there's McQueen, O'Brien, and Desnoyers. Those are probably the guys that if the Bruins are in this position, you're going to be talking about. And I guess I'll start with talking about, and we'll all just give our 2 cents on these people. I want to start with talking about James Higgins because he's the local guy. And when you go and you watch these other prospect rankings, maybe you've been watching them on YouTube, maybe you've been reading about them. The knock on Higgins always seems to be he's not the guy driving that line, but he was on a line with 2 guys that are now in the NHL. Like, he's been switched around to different lines, but like a lot of the time he was playing with Perreault, and maybe he wasn't driving it in the same way that some of these guys are like the only guy, but he was on a team full of the guy. So I do think that that's a little bit overblown, and I think we'll probably get to see that better this year in his second year at BC.
Yeah, I also think it's like not even really entirely fair because I guess it depends on like how you define driving the line. Like, was he the best player at the NCAA level on that line? No, like Leonard and Perreault were a year older. They were sophomores. They were returning stars. Leonard led the country in goals. So in that sense, like, yeah, he was maybe the third best player on that line this season. But I also think of like when you talk about driving a line, I also think about like who is transitioning the puck, like who's flipping the ice, who's taking, they're in the D zone. How do we get to the offensive zone? Like, I think that is part of driving a line. And there were plenty of times this year where like I watched James Higgins be a one-man transition game. Like, he'd pick the puck up in the D zone, use his speed through center ice, and gain the offensive zone. And I'm like, to me, that qualifies as driving the line. Like, you just took your team, 150 feet from the D zone to the O zone. And he can do that because he's such a good skater and he's so talented with the puck on his stick. So, yeah, look, he finished at a point per game, so it wasn't Macklin Celebrini or Adam Fantilli or Jack Eichel. Like, it wasn't that level of production as a freshman. Those guys were all up over 1.5 per game. So I get why he slipped a little. People wanted to see more. You definitely want to see him score more goals and not just be the playmaker all the time. But yeah, I think to me, I mean, we'll see who Bridget ends up picking. But to me, if like people are dropping him out of the top 5, I think that's taking it too far the other way.
Yeah, and so he is a guy that the Bruins have a connection with, right? He's a guy that we know scouts for the Bruins, management for the Bruins have gotten to see a lot. And he is a very creative player. He's a little smaller. But he still has that time for the physical development. And when I was going through a lot of these other centers, it was like, all right, well, if there's certain issues that are much harder to fix to get somebody to an NHL level. And physically adding, because he's not like super short, but like physically adding muscle is one of the easier things that young players can do to reach that next level. Whereas saying adding a whole new dimension to their game, if they're a one-dimensional player, if they have like one calling card and then the rest isn't as evened out, is much more difficult. So I do think he's competent defensively. He plays good in all 3 zones. I think that he's a safe choice at 5. But I wanted to get to some of the other guys because some of the other guys people were saying might have a higher ceiling. And that's why I want to ask you guys this question. Would you rather the Bruins draft a guy, say they are drafting 5th, would you rather have them choose one of the best centers available left that has the highest ceiling but is the biggest risk? Or would you rather have them pick a guy that, like, and I've seen Desnoyers and Hagens both probably being the more well-rounded of the guys that would be available here, and I would call them probably the safest here? Or would you rather them swing for the fences and go for somebody like McQueen, who has an injury history, who people are saying could have gone number 1 maybe if he had a chance to play his entire season, but he's had injuries last year, this year, and so there's risk in picking someone like him? Would you rather them go out of their way to take a little extra risk because this guy might be the true like top center in this draft?
Well, I guess it would depend on who is taken and who's available. But if those are the names that I'm given between, I mean, Matthew Schaefer didn't play a lot of games this year, and he maintains the status of being the consensus number 1. And I know, and Scott can mention this, but a lot of McQueen's points came in a small amount of games against lower competition relative to the league he was playing in. And so I don't even know if, I guess I don't even know if McQueen is that swing for the fences pick. I mean, he hasn't really, I don't know what his pedigree is that says he's that guy. He might end up being amazing, but to me, I don't even know if he's a potential highest ceiling player.
Yeah, I mean, I think Hagens has a higher ceiling than McQueen. Like, I don't really see the case otherwise. I'm not a big fan of McQueen. I'm pretty down on him. If people read my draft board, I have him 8th, and basically what I wrote is like, if the Bruins were picking 8th and the 7 guys above him were off the board, I'd be okay with taking that chance. But they're not going to pick it. They can't go lower than 7. So he would not be my pick for the Bruins.
He's off of your list essentially for Bruins because they wouldn't be drafting at that position.
Correct. Yeah. I just the injury, yes, it's a back injury. Those are concerning. But also, yeah, just the other stuff that like Brian mentioned, most of let me get the exact number here because it's a good stat. So he only ended up playing 17 regular season games because of the injury. he had 20 points, but 12 of those points came in 4 games against the 2 worst teams in the WHL. So the other 13 games, he had 8 points, and then he had 1 point in 3 playoff games. Now, look, maybe that's because he came back and he wasn't fully over the back injury yet, but that all adds together to like just too many red flags, too many concerns for me, too many risks that aren't there with other players and with these other centers we're talking about. And I'll also say, like, just watching some video of McQueen, like I didn't come away overly impressed because like I even made sure to find stuff from before his injury, and I don't know, like he kind of drifts a bit, and like you want to talk about like not really driving play, like he didn't really stand out to me as a guy who drives play. And there's even I think it was from Keen's Hockey. It was either Keen's Hockey or FC Hockey. Had some analytics on like his involvement in transition, and it kind of it backs that up. Like he doesn't exit the zone. He's not the guy carrying the puck out of the D zone a ton. He's not the guy carrying it into the offensive zone a ton. So that like it just worries me a bit. Like he might be more of a complementary center than any of these other guys, where he's like actually not going to drive play. He's going to need. Now, look, the Bruins have a David Pastrnak, so if you put him on a line there, like maybe it wouldn't matter. But I think we've kind of seen that, like, you know, Pastrnak can make anyone better, but ideally you have someone with him who can do some things themselves too, and you know, isn't just an Elias Lindholm who kind of has to hang around and wait for the puck to get to him.
So, Brian, I don't know if you had any thoughts on either of those guys.
I'll save my thoughts as we continue on down, but I'm good for right now.
And then the last guy I wanted to bring up was Desnoyers. And O'Brien, because we haven't had a chance to talk about him either. These are 2 centers that are left. The funny thing to me is, and this was as of the last 2 weeks, Elite Prospects has Anton Frendel, who you have as the second best center in this draft, at 12. And they have all of the other guys, O'Brien, Desnoyers, McQueen, and Hagens, all above him. And they actually had McQueen as going 5 overall. And I do think that there's so much risk involved. A lot of them thought that Hagens was the safer but not better player of the 2 of them, which is just interesting, different perspective. Certain people see different things. We see college hockey all the time, so we probably could give a better insight onto Hagens maybe than they might. But Desnoyers, also considered one of the safer guys here. And Scott, I know you've done a lot of research into him. From what I've seen and what I've read into, he's a guy who can impact all 3 zones. Good forecheck, defensively pretty solid. Considered to be one of the more consistent guys that would still be available. You know, kind of know exactly what you're getting, and they were saying like a hard skill game, which is like tipping pucks, like just his offensive skill set is a skill set that will translate to the NHL. So I would consider him to be somebody that would, if I were to rank who I think that the Bruins should take here, I will tell you, I think it should be between Desnoyers and Hagens.
So, I mean, I'll tip my hand on my opinion in a second, because at pick 6, I think I'm going to be toggling between 2 of these guys. This is not my selection, Bridget. This is yours. I mean, I know who I would take here.
I already know who I'm taking, but I just wanted us to talk about it.
No. I know. I'm just saying, like, in this situation, I'd be taking who I believe you're going to go with here. But at 6, there's going to be an interesting conversation to be had about who's next, and that is my pick. So I'll reserve that for then. Scott, I don't know if you had any finishing takes here.
I'll just quickly, give my thoughts on Desnoyers and O'Brien. Desnoyers, I really like. He's so smart, and he's such a hard worker. Like he's a guy. Like when I hear people talk about like safe picks, I think he's the safest, because to me, like he's gonna be a good number 2 center at worst. Like I almost can't envision a scenario where like he's just a third line center. He does everything so well, and there is some offensive skill there. Like that, he doesn't have Frundell's shot or Hagen's skating, but you do see him make some high end plays. He was the best player on the best team in the QMJHL this season, the Moncton Wildcats, and now he's been the best player in the whole league in the playoffs. He has through, I don't know if they played last night, so I didn't check, but he had 22 points through 11 playoff games. Moncton is the favorite to win the QMJHL, get to the Memorial Cup. So that's only going to help his stock if he keeps playing like this in the playoffs. So I'm a fan of his. And Jake O'Brien, I like too. And I know Brian's been on him for a while, but really good playmaker, great vision. Definitely has some bulking up to do. He's a bit of him and Denwye both have some bulking up to do. They're both a little string beanie, but that's only going to help them though. Like as they add muscle, they're just going to be able to win more battles. So O'Brien does have a little bit of the overpassing like Hagen's. Like there's times I think you'd want to see him shoot more, but another just really smart two-way player.
Okay, so I think we're going to get more into O'Brien as well after, because that's not going to be my pick here. So whoever's picking him, we'll talk more about him there. So I'm going to select James Hagens for the Bruins at number 5. I think that it's a good fit for a lot of reasons. I think he's got a high ceiling. I think the things that he needs to work on are fixable. I think the skills he already has translate to that will translate to the NHL in time. He's not gonna be on your team next year. He definitely needs another year of development at Boston College, but maybe after that, maybe after his sophomore season, he joins your team, and so you're still not that far out from seeing him play for the Bruins, and you get to go watch him play at Boston College, and maybe we have higher viewership for Hockey East. Because Bruins fans want to watch him play and get their own eyes on him. And he's going to be, he'll be playing there with some of the other Bruins prospects as well. And they'll have a close eye on him there. I think he is someone you should be happy to get at number 5 if he's still available there. And I don't want them to fall into the trap, and I don't think they will, because they've seen him probably more than anyone else, that he has these flaws of not driving the line, because he certainly is, I think, going to be able to do that really well next season. And he was just on such a good team with such other good players around him. That's hard to judge him on that. So I think he's the best guy available at 5 for the Bruins to take. And I think for a lot of reasons, he's going to mesh in pretty well with the system and be the guy that they want there.
So I agree with everything you just said. He would be my pick here as well. I will say, I wonder if the Bruins would go Denwye instead. And the reason I say that is because we heard Don Sweeney on Nesson express frustration with guys not being shot ready and overpassing. And I wonder if that seeps into draft decision making as well, where they might be down on a player who can be guilty of that, who can be guilty of not being shot ready and overpassing. And I would say that applies to O'Brien as well. So I do wonder if maybe they'd go Denwye here instead, someone who I think does shoot a little more. Also might be, a more complete player. Although, as you said, like I do think Hagens plays defense. Like I don't think that's a weakness at all for him. So I'm with you. I would go Hagens. I wonder if the Bruins would make the same decision.
Well, that makes 3 of us in this situation where we would pick James Hagens for Boston at 5. If those were the players,
get so many comments like, oh, of course they picked a guy from BC.
Well, he also was the projected
make your case
in December.
If you're gonna leave that comment, make your case for someone else. Leave a comment on YouTube or tweet at us. Like, listen, I'm open to other ideas, but don't just dismiss it because he goes to BC. Listen, I would love to dismiss all the BC players. Okay, more than anyone, like get them all away from me. But I think it would be a smart pick here.
Yeah.
Again, 3.5 months ago, 4 months ago, he was projected to potentially go first overall. So he's a very highly anticipated prospect and with a high ceiling.
And hey, maybe him having a little bit of I'm not even calling it down year. It was a good season for him, but like a little bit less than what people were expecting works out for the Bruins. Like, and next year he's just as dynamic and incredible as people thought he was going to be this year. It just took him another year to get his feet under him. If that's what happened and the Bruins get him, and he will look like a steal. Like it will look like oh, he just had 1 year where he wasn't quite putting it together as much as we thought he was going to, but he actually could end up being just as good as what people thought he would be when they were scouting him earlier in the year. So it could be one of those drafts where we were joking, like tank for Hagens at number 1, but you didn't you still end up with him at 5 potentially.
Yeah, can I read you guys a couple other items on James Hagens' resume? So last season, 23-24, he played for the U.S. Under-18 team, National Development Program. He had 102 points in 58 games. 5 players ever in that program have had a higher rate of production on that team. Jack Hughes, Will Smith, Gabe Perreault, Austin Matthews, Phil Kessel. That's it. End of list. Did this World U18 Championships that's going on right now in Texas, Hagens played in that last year and broke the tournament record for points. That tournament record was previously held by Nikita Kucherov. The year before, he broke the record for the World U17 Hockey Challenge. So, the World Juniors this year, he was the number 1 center as an underager on a team that won gold. He led all forwards on that team in ice time.
He's sneaky. Yeah. I think this is the thing is he is quietly doing all the little things right. He's not flashy, but he's sneaky, making all these good plays, and he's not he doesn't have a big ego. He's got a good personality. He fits. I think he would be a good fit. And he's just because he's not Leonard, and you don't see him making a check and then putting the puck in the back of the net, totally different style players, but both are effective and both are going to be good NHLers.
By the way, he will do that sometimes. I mean, first round of the NCAA tournament, BC's in a surprisingly tight game against Bentley, and he's the one who wins a puck and wraps it in for the winning goal late in regulation. I also think I've seen you see him step up in big moments too.
And I broadcast the PC BC game this year at home. Well, I had 2, but the second one I was broadcasting because the first one was on ESPN. And his line just absolutely dominated. The passing, the vision. We're talking about Matt Patra as having good vision. Wait till you see James Hagens. It's another level.
Okay, so at number 6 we have Seattle, right? So far we've got Schaefer going 1 to Chicago, Misa going 2nd to Nashville, Porter Martone 3rd to San Jose, Anton Frondell 4th to Philly, James Hagens 5th to Boston, and now we have Seattle with the 6th pick. So to me, this pick comes down to Caleb Desnoyers versus Jake O'Brien for me. And I would say the same thing if the board fell the same way and Boston was picking 6th. And I think Desnoyers versus Jake O'Brien is one of the tougher debates for me in my mind when I'm looking at the board and how it might play out for the Bruins, because for the Bruins, they have a 17.1% chance of picking either first or second. And unless it's first, they'll probably it's not, if they pick second, they'll just take one of probably Misa or Schaefer, whoever doesn't go. If they pick first, there's a big debate there. But I think I would go Misa in that situation based off of the Bruins' need for a high-end centerman. The second debate that is the toughest, that's an easier debate for me. Misa versus Schaefer is honestly, for the Bruins, it's easier for me to decide that. It's tougher for me for O'Brien versus Desnoyers. Now, I know this is a pick for Seattle. I think the Bruins in Seattle are kind of mirror images when it comes to picking in a spot. So you guys have talked a lot about Denwye, and I agree with everything. He is a 3-zone player. When people call him a safe player, it kind of sounds like you're knocking his upside potential, but that's not really what people are suggesting. But I see the leadership qualities. He had 84 points in 56 games. He plays in the queue, right? Jake O'Brien plays in Neo, and the OHL is noted for being the probably the best of those junior programs in Canada, junior leagues in Canada. They produce the highest amount of NHLers, I think, and all those things. Jake O'Brien in the OHL had 98 points in 66 games. Again, Denwye 84 points in 56 games in the queue. Scott mentions Denwye is the best player on the best team in the queue, and he is all of those things. I think for some reason, and Jake O'Brien has shot up to 4th in NHL Central Scouting among North American skaters, I believe. So he is making that climb. But for some reason, and even on Tankathon, they saw him going 10th. I don't know if it's updated or not. He is being slept on. And when it comes to Seattle and Boston for that matter, but more so Seattle, because Seattle already has Matty Beniers. I view Matty Beniers as that high floor top 2 center already in their system, potentially number 1 center, right? He's the number 1 center right now. So I think Seattle more so than Boston is in a situation here to maybe go with the player that isn't labeled as the safer pick, that might have the more offensive upside in the NHL. If you have Matty Beniers to be that two-way responsible centerman that can skate like the wind, maybe Seattle can afford to go with Jake O'Brien here. And if I were Seattle, I think I would. And in fact, that is my pick. So I would take Jake O'Brien here at 6 if I'm Seattle for his vision, his playmaking ability, his hockey IQ. Scott mentions he's an overpasser. Yeah, he tends to do that. I think a lot of players do. I think Denwye also. I think like all these guys outside of Misa and Frondell, probably you could say that you might want him to shoot a little bit more. If this was Boston picking 6th, I think it's a tougher decision because you don't have a Matty Beniers right now, but Seattle does. So for that reason, I'm gonna stick with Matty Beniers as one of our top 2 centers, and we're gonna get Jake O'Brien into our system to be that more offensive playmaker to complement Beniers in the top 6 as your number 1 and number 2 centers for the future. And I would go Jake O'Brien here. Now there's gonna be some teams licking their lips here for Denwye, who's now dropped to at least 7th. But the way the board has shaken out, and based on Seattle already having Beniers, I don't think they're gonna go. I don't think they should go with the high floor safer pick here. I think they should go with Jake O'Brien.
Yes, Seattle's really interesting, and like you laid out a lot of it, but I like they could also just not go center if they had a wing, like maybe they have Victor Eklund ranked as their best player available here because not just Beniers, but like Shane Wright finally start to put it together this season. They have Chandler Stevenson signed. Like in the immediate near term, center's not the biggest need for them. But I am also a believer that like you should probably just take the best player. And also, I don't really think you can have too many centers. So it makes sense. But I do think they're a team that if they had, say, Eklund ranked as their best player, they could go wing here, or maybe in one of the defensemen like Jackson Smith or Radim Murka. Murka can move right down the road. He's playing with the Seattle Thunderbirds in the WHL. So yeah, like they could go anywhere, but O'Brien makes sense to me.
And the Carter Bear I've seen like projected to go around this range, another left winger. Some people feel really highly about him as well. I had a lot of notes on O'Brien, and I've done a lot of research on him as well because I kind of knew who I thought the Bruins should take if they were in the top 5, but then when you get outside of the top 5, it's kind of more where I dug in. And so like Desnoyers and O'Brien and Hagens were kind of the ones that I did the most, and McQueen a little bit were the ones I did the most research on. And was interesting to me about O'Brien was that there was people have been comping him to Elias Pettersson, which Elias Pettersson obviously was top 5 draft pick, impactful, good player. But one of the knocks that I had seen for O'Brien was that he might be a little riskier in terms of will his skills and strengths translate at a higher level, because I've seen people call him maybe a little bit one-dimensional, talking about his offense, and that his positioning and defense are still stuff that he needs to work on.
I mean, I think it's fair to say he needs to work on it, but I think that goes for a lot of these players. I mean, they're 17, 18-year-old kids that are not fully developed and physically or game, stylistically. And I think O'Brien has a lot more two-way game to his name than people probably give him credit for. But yeah, I look, I mean, you're right, Bridget. Like, once you get past 5, in my opinion, it gets real tricky. It's a pick 'em, really. And you can look at Denwye and O'Brien and Higgins, and they all got to hit the gym and eat a bunch of steak this summer. And the strength translating, their game translating to the pro level. Yeah, I mean, there are certain players where you look at James Higgins' skating ability and you say, yeah, his skating will translate at the NHL level, no doubt about it. Then you have a Denwye or a Jake O'Brien, where their skating ability at their current level is very good, very strong. But you do see, or like an Anton Frondel, where there's people say about Frondel, once he gets going, he's a moose. Once he gets going, right? So the NHL is all about quickness as well. So even some of the guys that are probably going to go in the top 5, it's just their skating will have to improve. But that's the NHL draft. That's most of these players.
Yeah, if these guys were more finished products and didn't have question marks, they'd be in the conversation to go first overall. Like, there's a reason that, in a draft where there isn't maybe that generational, Connor McDavid type, or even Connor Bedard or Macklin Celebrini, there's a reason you see Schaefer and Misa at the top, because they're the ones who have the most plus attributes and the fewest question marks. It's like basically what it comes down to. Like, they're the ones who look closest to finished products, where you're like, they're going to be ready soon because there's less that they have to work on. So yeah, like everyone after that, yeah, there's stuff they have to work on, all of them.
Yeah, I think you're next, Scott, right? You got.
Yep, I got the Buffalo Sabres at 7. And my note on them, I just had best forward available. I think they have some defensemen with need to get better defensively as well, but I think they need to continue to build out this forward group, and I think they'd be very happy to take Caleb Denwye if he slips this far. He is the best forward available on my board. That they have some center prospects, but I wouldn't say they're set at center where you're like, oh, we know who our top 2 to 3 centers for the next 6 years are. Like even Tage Thompson, they move to the wing sometimes. So I really think the Sabres just need the best player, and more specifically the best forward. So they get Caleb Denwye.
All right, I'm not surprised. Also, he has got the hardest name to spell. So if he ends up in Boston, pronunciation and spelling, we are all going to have to get it down pat and learn it.
After Hustendinov, everything's gravy.
I was gonna say, I don't know how naturally the full French pronunciation Denwye will. I don't know how naturally that's going to come to Boston. I think you're going to get a lot of
French people here.
I think you're going to get a lot of that Denoya's kid.
Yeah, Denoya's. Yeah, no. Well, I should have at least a little bit of a step up, considering my name is so French, and I kind of understand French pronunciations, but I'm not going to claim to be perfect at it. Anyhow, so Denoye at 7 to Buffalo, which brings me to I'm back to my pick, which is Anaheim. So Scott, we were talking about this before we started recording. Because Anaheim has drafted so high over the last few years, like there's been gaps that they've been able to fill in terms of like what their system has, what it's still looking for. They've got a lot of young prospects in their system. Can you bring us through what you think that their biggest need is right now?
Well, so I think they have a lot of needs. I think the one position where they might not go would be left shot defenseman. And the reason I say that is because they've got Jackson Lacombe, 24 years old, really good young defenseman, number top pairing type player. Pavel Minchikov, another left shot defenseman, 21 years old. They're high on him. And Olin Zellweger, 21-year-old left shot defenseman. So those guys all played in the NHL already, and I think they probably feel pretty good that like that's the left side of their defense moving forward. I think they could definitely use right shot defensemen. I think they could definitely use more help up front. So I feel like they can probably go any way other than maybe left shot D.
Which, you know, they probably were more likely to take, like, best available here is more likely to be a forward anyway. Their board probably would have Victor Eklund up there at this point. I would think they maybe their Roger McQueen is somebody that interests them as a center, Eklund being a winger, Carter Bear being a winger, that those guys are still available and were ranked in the top 8 for elite prospects, and some of these guys are ranked there in multiple different, there's like 10 different ones you can look at for if you're looking for where they're ranked. So to me, I don't know if they'd have a preference over winger or center, and it probably comes down to just who they rate higher as like a complementary piece. And for some reason, I think maybe Victor Eklund would be their guy here. And he's a winger. He can play right or left side, so he's got a little versatility to him. Whereas McQueen, who we went over earlier, is a center with potentially high upside, but also the injury history and not complete game. And Scott, you had him going at 8, correct? Or that was your 8th? In your article, you had him right around.
Yeah, I think I had him 9th. I think I had McQueen ahead of him just from a Bruins perspective, but like positional need aside, I think I'd probably do like Eklund a little more. I really like the way he plays. Like he's a little undersized, 5'10" or 5'11", depending on where you look. But he's tenacious on the puck. He's got some skill. He's a really good skater. And I think wing makes sense for Anaheim. Like they've got, you've got Leo Carlson and Mason McTavish down the middle. Cutter Gauthier played more wing this year, but is also a natural center. So I think that pick would make a lot of sense.
I think Zegras has experience at center too, right? So
yeah, but plays more wing now.
Plays more wing now. Yeah. I think from what I've seen of Victor Eklund, and no comparison is ever apples to apples, but when I watch him play, an NHL comp that just comes to my mind immediately is Jesper Bratt in New Jersey. I think he plays similar to him as far as his skating style, his hands, his skill set. Eklund does have a bit of bite to his game for his size. I don't watch Bratt on a nightly basis and know if he has that necessarily on a regular basis, but stylistically, he reminds me a lot of Jesper Bratt in New Jersey. And I would also pick him in this position if I were Anaheim as well.
Okay, so at 8, Anaheim goes with Victor Eklund. And that leaves Brian with the last pick that we're going to do today with Pittsburgh.
Yes. Penguins here, they're going to go with Roger McQueen. I mean, they're in a very interesting spot where, and Carter Bear is another, person that they can go with. I just think Pittsburgh, they have needs everywhere. Obviously, Sidney Crosby is a pretty damn good number 1 center at the moment. but Sidney Crosby's days are numbered in the NHL. So we're talking forward looking. They fired Mike Sullivan recently, and Elliot Friedman was saying on NHL Network that there's the belief that Kyle Dubas is looking at more of a rebuild here in Pittsburgh, and Mike Sullivan's more in a win now mode. And so they philosophically had some differences there, and they parted ways. Well, I think with Pittsburgh drafting 9th in this scenario, I think they're probably willing to take a flyer on Roger McQueen's skill and his size, and hope that he can be one of their top forwards of the future down the middle, or at wing if that's where he ends up. But I think at 9, you're going to take a flyer on Roger McQueen at this point.
Yeah, an interesting spot for them, because it's like, you're right. If they had a little shorter term vision, then maybe you might think take the best wing available and hope they're ready in a year to play with Crosby or Malkin. But yeah, they do have to start thinking about the center position post Crosby and Malkin, not be guilty of what the Bruins were guilty of, quite frankly, where they almost basically wait until Bergeron and Krejci retired to start addressing it, and it's like, well, that's too late. Like, you're not going to get someone ready if you wait until they're actually gone. The one other player I would maybe wonder about here is Pittsburgh really needs help on the left side of their defense. And Jackson Smith is ranked right around this range too. Either him or Merck is the second best defenseman in this draft, I think. Smith left shot, Merck right shot. So I could also see him, but yeah, they're a team that could take the chance on McQueen, especially at 9. Like, even me being down on McQueen a little, I'm okay with him here.
Yeah, I mean, by a lot of different boards, they have him 9 or better. So like, this is, and there's quite a few that had him at 5 and 6. So this is probably the tail end of what his range would be. Though I did see one board rank him at 17. McQueen, I'm talking about. So some people aren't quite as high on him. Others are very high on him, and I think maybe they're projecting off of the smaller amount of information that they have.
Yeah, I think I've mentioned him on here before, but Pete Hughes on Twitter, who's I think his handle's at Western Hockey Scout. He's a former scout, and I just find his analysis of prospects to be pretty good. And he's the one who called McQueen the most overrated prospect he's seen in years, and he does not have him in the first ront. He doesn't have a first round grade on him.
Not even in the first round. Wow.
That's like the extreme opposite end.
That sounds like someone who might not like the individual. That's a bit of a damning to get him out of the first round when someone's ranked in 10 in the top 10 on most credible boards. Let me ask you guys a question, because Matt Schaefer, are you surprised that, now granted, 22 points in 17 games before getting hurt. Okay, there's no denying what he did when he was in the lineup. Okay, still, are you surprised that he is the consensus number 1 in a year where he played 17 games prior to getting hurt, and Michael Misa was scoring at a 2 point per game clip, or just around there all season for the most part? Is that surprising to you? I mean, 17 games, it is a small portion of the season. It's not like he played 45 and then was hurt for 30, or that's a lot of the season to miss to be a consensus number 1.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised that we haven't seen more rankings put Misa first and turn this into more of a debate. I think there's a couple out there I've seen that have, but very few and far between. So yeah, I guess I am a little surprised, because I think we talked, this is probably like a month or two ago at this point, maybe about a month ago, about some of these guys. And that was when I posed the question of, if the Bruins get the number 1 pick, what do you do? And at the time I was thinking, again, based off rankings, like, yeah, Schaefer's the clear number 1 guy. And then the more I dove into it and did more of my own research, not to sound like that guy, but
He's
but
like not into his conspiracy.
yeah. But like dove into the video myself and wasn't just depending on what other people wrote about them. It's like I don't really see why Misa should be like a clear like I don't see why there should be much of a gap there. Like how you actually rank them is listen, if you still want to put Schaefer first, like that's fine. He is impressive. If you watch some of like his play in international tournaments, it's he was Canada's best player in World Juniors until he got hurt this year. I know that was only 4 periods, so it's a small sample, but like the first game, it was like he was clearly the best player on the ice. Now Misa got left off that team controversially. Like
Yeah, so he didn't have a chance to be the best player on the ice.
right, along with some other players, by the way, like that. Jake O'Brien wasn't on that team either. Like there were a lot of questionable decisions, and Canada suffered as a result. But yeah, I don't know. Like everything I see from Misa, I'm like, what's the reason I'm not considering him first overall again? Like
Yeah,
he's really impressive.
Well, and if the Bruins were to come up with which they have an 8.5% chance where they currently are to pick first overall, like it kind of seems like it would be a mistake for them to take Schaefer over Misa if they were to. That's not how it played out in our Tankathon experiment today, but if they were to get first overall, it seems like Misa should be the guy they go with.
I couldn't agree more. And I've been saying this for a while, and I listen. I understand the pros to drafting Matt Schaefer, and he's going to be an incredible prospect, going to be an incredible NHL player, and yes, he would have the ability to sooner than later, potentially as soon as next year, but maybe the year after, be the Bruins power play quarterback, and he's your left defenseman for the next 15 years, and potentially is your number 1 defenseman over Charlie McAvoy. If you're a number 1 defenseman over Charlie McAvoy, you're a pretty good player, right? So like those are the possibilities of drafting a player like that. I just think that it's tougher to find a first line center than it is to find a top left defenseman. You find Hampus Lindholm. Has anybody been saying he's not a good enough top left defenseman? Like you found him in a trade midway through his career. Like yes, it can happen at center too. It's much more difficult. And so from the Bruins perspective, first of all, he's lights out. I don't know why he wasn't on that Canadian World Junior roster. I know there's a lot of Canadian fans that were pissed about the roster construction. Canada didn't do well in that tournament. But I have been watching Misa and for a while, and to me it's a no-brainer. So when you look at, and that's not to disrespect Schaefer. I mean, to me, I think most of the time in professional sport drafts, I do think most of the time you just go with the best player available. I really do believe that. I do think that there are some exceptions. And I think when your center position, I know the Bruins have Matt Patra and they have Fraser Minton as young center prospects, but let's be honest, guys, those are not number 1 center prospects. Matt Patra is not a number 1 center of the future. So the Bruins, and they don't, and even their NHL centers right now, you talk about Lindholm and Zach or whomever. It's like these aren't true number 1 guys. So if the Bruins have a chance to get a guy like that, you have to do it. And the way I look at it, they have a 17% chance of potentially getting Misa. I know that's kind of like silly math, but there's a 17% chance that they pick first or second. So half that's if they pick first. I think they should take Misa. If they pick second, there's a damn good chance that whoever picks first takes Schaefer, and then they're left with Misa. So, I'll take those odds.
Yeah, and now I will say that the one counter is if the Bruins or any team goes through this whole process and they come out of it and say, "Oh, we do have Schaefer ranked clearly ahead of Misa," like we do see a gap there. If you see a gap, then to me you should take Schaefer. Like if you think like this guy's going to be a Norris Trophy winner and Misa's going to be a good, not great number 1 center, then fine. Then go ahead and take Schaefer. Like I think that's absolutely justified. But if you come to the conclusion that they're really close, which is where I'm at now, then yeah, I'm with Brian. Like, you take the center because you need it more and they're harder to come across.
Yeah.
And even if there is a gap, and if there's a gap, like my tune might change a little bit if there's that much of a gap. Again, I haven't seen that. But even if there was a bit of a gap, I still have the question of, okay, so you got that Norris guy, and that's great. Like, that's amazing. Okay, but who's your number one center of the future, and how are you getting it? Do you plan on drafting it in the top 10? I don't think you plan on ever drafting in the top 10. Are you gonna make that hockey trade that nobody knows of? Maybe. It's just tough. Is that guy gonna be available in free agency? We all know most number one centers don't become available in free agency unless they're in their mid-30s or something. So it's just now it's like, okay, you have that you have that potential Norris Trophy guy of the future. That's awesome. Love it. But I still have the big, 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 bold question mark of, okay, so then how are we going to get that guy?
Yeah.
And
I
I just
think
think that
it's
drafting
true.
that center, that question mark just kind of fades a little bit. Even if he's a good, not great number one center, it's better than not having one.
Yeah. And it just feels like the conversation has been in the philosophy so far has been like take a bunch of swings at centers and hope one of them pans out. Like that's why they got Fraser Mitten. That's why, they allowed Matt Poitras to come up through the system and give him a chance out of camp and see what they had. And that's why they went out and got Pavel Zacha before Bergeron and Krejci left. And we're hoping maybe he could be an option there. But so they've taken a lot of swings, but I don't think that they have that guy still that could be the number one center of the future. Even though Elias Lindholm was signed to an extended contract, even his contract isn't what you would pay, like isn't as high as what you would pay a number one center. And you do need to have some guys starting to come up from within for cap reasons because getting a rookie on your cap is much different than adding a number one center at market value. It seems like to me it would be a missed opportunity. It would be something that the Don Sweeney drafting hatred crew would just latch right onto. And not saying that's why anybody should ever make a decision, but I would see their point. And I think it would be tough to not take Misa if you were at 1 or 2. And I wanted to throw this back up here just for 1 second because I want people to just realize they're probably not picking 3rd or 4th. If you look at the numbers there, like not even physically possible for them to draft 4th and 3rd. We're not even sure if that 0.3 is correct. So we're not sure they really even have a chance.
There's like a very small chance where I think it involves like Detroit moving up to 2 because they can't go to 1 or something. Like, I don't know. There's some very, very minute possibility.
So what I'm saying is basically the Bruins will not be drafting 3rd or 4th. Like that's pretty much off the table. So they're either drafting 1 or 2 or that range from 5th to 7th.
And I would be willing to bet that obviously Matt Schaefer, a defenseman, and Porter Martone, a winger, they're gonna go in the top 4. I mean, I could see Martone. I could see him dropping. I could because I could see teams valuing center. But
and there's questions about his skating. Like that's a real question mark.
There is. But to Bridges' point about not being able to draft 3rd or 4th, there's a solid chance. Let's say solid chance that Martone is one of those picks at 3 and 4. So when you're talking about the Bruins picking in the top 7, and you have 5 centers available in the top 7, Misa, Frondell, Hagens, O'Brien, Desnoyers. And then McQueen's further down and Carter Bear. But when you consider that the Bruins aren't picking lower than 7th, you know Schaefer's going in the top 7. So now you got 5 centers for 6 picks. You know Martone's gonna go. He's gonna go in the top 7. Someone's gonna take him in the top 7. Maybe it's the Bruins. But my point is, even if the Bruins don't get the opportunity to draft Michael Misa, okay, Frondell, Hagens, O'Brien, Desnoyers, chances are one of those will be walking across the podium in a Boston Bruins jersey. And to have that prospect in the system, massive for the Bruins. Even if the guy ends up being a 2C, a very good 2C, and maybe even an elite 2C. Okay, you need that guy. You need that guy. So the good news here is that whoever they select is going to be. And again, I've said this to you guys off the record, but if they draft Martone, I'm gonna have a bad feeling in my gut, just because it's no disrespect to the player. Scott just mentioned his skating isn't he. You could say he probably is one of the worst skaters of these, probably the worst skater of these top 10 prospects. And furthermore, yeah, the Bruins could use wings, but we just know that they need center more. You can buy wings in free agency. You can trade for them more easily. So if they were to take, I'd be okay coming out of this draft with anybody besides Martone, and that's strictly based on like that means that they pass on one of these centers that I just feel like they desperately need.
That was actually going to be my next question, because we're like late on time, but the last thing I wanted to finish was, is there anybody in the 9 guys that we have put up here today that you just would not want the Bruins to take? And Brian says Porter Martone, who we picked in the top 3 on here for someone else.
Well, it depends. If they're picking 7th, and Misa, Frondell, Hagens, O'Brien, Denway are all gone, right? And it's between Martone and McQueen or Carter Bear up front. No, I'm not going to hate that pick. But I guess it just depends how far they slide and who goes before. But if they take Martone, and again, I know there's a lot of people out there who love Porter Martone. I think he's going to be a great power forward. This has nothing to do with my lack of confidence in his ability to be a good NHL player. This is me, and hand to the sky here. This is me favoring need. And so I just know that if the Bruins take Martone, chances are that means that they're passing on probably one of O'Brien or Denway or hell, maybe even Hagens. Like, you never know. And I wouldn't like that.
Yeah. Scott, is there any center you think that you would be upset if they took at, say they're drafting 5th, 6th, or 7th?
Yeah, I mean, we touched on it, but McQueen, I'm not very high on McQueen, and that, so if people look at like the big board I post on weei.com, that's kind of the point of it. I had McQueen 8th, which means he's outside my Bruins pick range. So yeah, I would take Martone over him if it came to that. But I'm with Brian. I would take any of those other centers over Martone. And I do want to make clear, like, I really like Porter Martone. Like, yes, there's questions about his skating. You'd like to see more pull away speed, but he protects the puck well. He plays physical. He's a really good playmaker, which is not always something people associate with power forward when they hear that term. Like, he's got the size. He's 6'3", 208, I think. But he has like legit vision and passing skill with the puck on his stick. And he's a good stick handler too. So there's a lot to like there. I like the centers more, and I think they make more sense for the Bruins other than McQueen, who I'm down on. But so that's the pick for me, because Bridget, as you outlined, like, there are rankings that have McQueen in the top 5 or 6 that have him ahead of Frondell or Denway or O'Brien. So like
they have Frondell at 10 to 12.
Right. So like we're grouping these guys together, and like we're putting a gap there between the rest of those centers and McQueen. But there are definitely going to be teams that do not have a gap there and might even have McQueen ahead of those guys. And so if the Bruins end up being one of those teams and if they draft McQueen 5th and Denway and O'Brien are sitting there, like, I'm going to have concerns about that. And I will say as much if and when that happens.
Yeah, if the Bruins' need for a center wasn't so desperate, then I'd be sitting here saying, yeah, take Martone, whatever. He's going to be a great NHL player. Most teams don't enter the draft in the top 10 with such a clear need. Where it gets real interesting for me, is if Boston ends up picking 2nd, and whoever picks 1st takes Misa. Now you got Matt Schaefer on the board, who, like I said, that's a position where you can find a left shot defenseman in other ways, and you can find wingers in other ways. It's tough to find that center. But this is now where that gap that Scott refers to, I do think would come into play for me, where I'd say, okay, do I want to draft Matthew Schaefer second, or Anton Frondell, or
Or
James
Higgins.
Higgins, or whomever? In this situation, well, Brian, their need for center is so strong. Yeah, I know. That's why it's a tough call. But I would hate to be the idiot who passed on a future Norris Trophy winner for, like Frondell or Higgins. I just think Misa is the distinction here is like, I don't find that gap between Misa and Schaefer, at least as of right now. I think I've said this before. I think Michael Misa is just as good at his position as Matthew Schaefer is at his. But if Misa goes first and the Bruins are picking second, okay, I think in this situation I would probably have to go Schaefer here, despite
I
how
feel like
badly I want that center.
There's picking second if Misa's already off the board is very interesting to me, because it becomes like a polarizing pick, because there's still going to be half of the camp of fans that wants just a center and to go for a need, and the other half, like, there will be a split. However, I think you can't go wrong at 2 if you do either, because Schaefer, it's like, okay, that's an obvious great player. And then a center is fitting an obvious need. So it's a big difference in what you're choosing. But also, I feel like no matter who you go with there, if it's the top center left that you really like, that's good. If it's Schaefer, that's good too. Like, it's still not as big of a conundrum as people might think, because I think you get a good player there either way. You get a player that you should be happy.
Well,
I mean, no matter who they pick at 2, you should be happy, because you're not picking 7th.
Yeah,
right? Like, that's how I look at it.
I would push back against the idea that you can't go wrong. You can go wrong. If Matthew Schaefer is a Norris contender year in, year out, and you took Frondell or Higgins over him and they top out as a number 2 center, you went wrong. Like, Frondell or Higgins might turn out to be a good player, but if you
looking back, like, I'm talking about, like, as of the day of, like, there's arguments.
Yeah, I guess I'm saying, like, that's why
we have a crystal ball that we know that Schaefer's going to do well and the others aren't.
Well, that's why I would take Schaefer, though, because he has that, like, elite, real high-end upside. And, like, Frondell and Higgins might, like, either one of them being a star number 1 center is not out of the question. I just think they're less likely to get close to that elite ceiling than Schaefer is. That's how I feel now. We'll see if that changes. I did write on my big board. I said, you might be able to talk me into taking Frondell in the top 2. I'm higher on him than Higgins, but I'm not quite there.
But
so I don't think it would be insane if you're really high on one of the centers and maybe you're a little down on Schaefer. But as of right now, I don't think I could bring myself to do that.
So, Scott, how much does that kind of speak to how much stock you put in the NHLE findings, where it says that Frondell has the highest rating of any of these draft prospects as far as being an NHL player and NHL star?
I mean, a little bit. Like, I do put some stock in that, but it's just part of the equation. Like, I'm not basing my entire draft off NHLE, because it is a formula that has also missed. So, yeah, like, I take that into account, and it's part of why I like Frondell, because his resume suggests there's a really good chance he's going to be a very good NHLer. But yeah, I would go Schaefer there, just because I think, to me, him being a legit top pairing defenseman is more likely than any non-Misa center being a legit bona fide first line player.
I think I speak for all of us on this podcast and all Bruins fans listening that the most indisputable best case scenario, as far as no controversy pick for the Bruins, would be if they got the second pick and someone took Schaefer first and you just take Misa. Is there a world where Don Sweeney drafts Caleb Denwye over Michael Misa at 2, honestly, I wouldn't put it past him. I wouldn't put it past him. But if the Bruins pick second and someone takes Schaefer, to me, it's like, all right, game, set, match, best case scenario. As far as like, mitigating risk of the draft pick and hindsight's 2020. It's like, no, you take that guy. Done.
Yeah.
All right.
Agreed.
Well, I feel like we covered a lot of ground today. Good job, guys. Great draft. Everybody did great. I think we're happy. So I hope maybe this gave people hope that even at 5, 6, or 7, there's going to be someone who can come in and help the Bruins. And just the different dynamics at play that would be ahead of them. Who needs centers? Who doesn't need centers? What some of the dynamics are. And we will continue to probably have changing opinions on this as time gets closer, as we read more. We're not going to stop doing our research on these guys because
we're gonna have an actual draft lottery to react to because it's coming up on Monday night.
Yep, Monday night, and they haven't announced the time yet exactly as of our recording, but we were guessing anywhere between like 6 and 8 o'clock. Normally before.
Yeah, it'll be like probably 15, 20 minutes or a half hour before the first game of the night, whenever that ends up being.
And that's where the real fun begins, because now you can really start to hone in on, all right.
And we'll do this again.
We honestly, maybe we do a more realistic one, because if the Bruins end up picking 6th or 7th, well, we know they're not getting Schaefer or Misa, or Hagens or Frondell most likely. So you're able to kind of narrow down to, all right, it's probably Denwye, O'Brien, Martone territory, maybe something like that. If they win the lottery, then oh boy, then there's a lot of possibilities. So that'll be fun. We'll find that out. Monday. Yeah,
Monday. Exciting.
Alrighty, and there's also, by the way, we'll have one more recording this week too, because guys, there is some stuff to talk about. There's the coaching carousel is getting very interesting, and I'm not going to talk about it too much because we're at an hour and a half. But if the Tampa Bay Lightning get defeated by the Panthers and they lose in round 1, does John Cooper become available in addition to Mike Sullivan and Peter Laviolette and Rick Tocchet? And it's just,
I think it would be so insane for Tampa to move on from John Cooper. Like,
I couldn't agree more. I don't know who you're going to get that's better for that. He's one of the best
John
coaches in
Tortorella.
hockey.
Definitely John Tortorella.
Tortorella back to Tampa. There you go.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll discuss all that on Friday. Thank you all very much for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week. We'll talk to you soon. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.